most frequent questions that I receive throughout my social media platforms when people come across my story and they see that I've rebuilt my life after deportation pretty comfortably in Mexico, is how do you find work? What do you do for a living? How do you get by? How did you establish yourself? So I wanted to make a video showing you guys how it is that I established myself once I arrived in Mexico after my deportation. The steps that I took, the websites that I've used, and how I was able to find US-based employment from Mexico after my deportation. So as a quick summary, you guys know that I was deported 4 years ago. I was deported very quickly from the US. My case, I've talked previously in my other videos about my case and how my deportation played out. But long story short, I woke up one day on February 1st, 2018. I went to work, I took my children to daycare, and 10 days later, I was on a flight back to Mexico. When I arrived here, I had no plan. I had no idea what I was going to do, how I was going to survive, how I was going to make a living, where I was going to work. So today's video, I'm going to go through my journey of how I established my life from housing to employment, to obtaining custody of my children, etc. So day one, when I arrived in Mexico, I didn't have anywhere to go. I didn't have any plans. I didn't have any type of housing arrangements. Unfortunately, ICE did not give us the opportunity to make any arrangements post-deportation. So when I arrived, I didn't know up from down. I hadn't been to Mexico since I was 5 years old, and so I really had, I felt like I had been thrown into this dark hole, and I was trying to maneuver my way through it, kind of gliding my way. I felt really blind when I got here. So anyway, initially when I arrived to Mexico, I was headed to Tepic because my biological father resides there, and although I didn't have a substantial relationship with him, he was the closest thing I had to family. So I flew out to PV because this is the closest airport to Tepic, PV aka Puerto Vallarta, Jalisco. And I was so tired from, you know, the journey. I had been shackled for 2 days in an airplane by this time. So I decided to stay the night and just rest. And the next morning, I just kind of started walking around town and getting to know the place. I started meeting people. Long story short, I decided to stay and not go to the beach because I just didn't see much of the peak, I guess. And, you know, I didn't have a very strong relationship with my father, so going to the peak versus staying here was almost equivalent to me because I felt more like my father was a stranger at the time anyway. So when I got here, I had this image, you know, my mom had spoken a lot to me about Mexico and what to expect through the 10 days that I was in ICE detention. And she kind of told me, like, look, you're going to be making maybe $400 to $500 a month on a good salary. You're going to be very poor. You're going to be very limited on resources, and it's a completely different world out here. So I was very scared, and I had that same mentality that, you know, I'm going to struggle out here, and I did for a little while. But I'm going to kind of go through the things that I encountered. So anyway, I'm going to go through my experience in establishing myself. So step one was finding housing. The first day, I slept in a hotel. I didn't have anything, I didn't have anyone, and I was winging it. My family helped me financially for the first little while. I had friends that had set up a small GoFundMe account, and I received about $200, which helped me kind of, you know, which helped me kind of get by the first little while. So anyway, where did I find housing? The first day, I just kind of walked around all over PV. On foot, you know, asking around. There were signs, you know, for rent, and I was just kind of walking and trying to find somewhere to live. And so I spent about a day or two doing that. It wasn't fruitful. Eventually, I started getting connected to other locals in PV, and I started looking for employment at the same time that I was looking for housing. I came across this company that interviewed me. It was a US-based company, actually out of Utah, and they were a Mexican registered company, but because they wanted me to work for them, they offered me assistance in finding housing. And it was the hiring manager started helping me look through Facebook Marketplace. And so Facebook Marketplace is kind of the go-to here, well, at least in my experience, where you go and you search for things first. It's kind of like the classified. So that is where I always tell people when people reach out to me, where do you find housing, rentals, etc. Facebook Marketplace. And so I'll go through, I'm going to show you guys really quickly how to access Facebook Marketplace and how I use it. It's very simple. You don't have to be located within the area. Like, you don't have to be in PV to search classifieds in PV. So you just log onto your Facebook app or web browser, you go to the marketplace, you change the area that you're searching in, and voila, you have access to all of the rentals available in that particular area. So anyway, Facebook Marketplace has been a tool that I use often for finding things for sale, from furniture to cars to rental places to vacation rentals, etc. I've also used Airbnb when I'm traveling. I wouldn't suggest Airbnb for long-term arrangements because you're typically going to get tourist rates. So a rule of thumb on Facebook Marketplace, or anytime you're really dealing with locals, is you don't want to tell them that you are, you know, from outside of Mexico, because unfortunately the pricing that you get is going to be based on where you're from, and if you're a tourist or local, etc. So anyway, I found my first rental on Facebook Marketplace, and I actually found 2 to 3 on here through the course of the time that I was renting before I moved into our permanent home. So I was able to find my first rental home on Facebook Marketplace. From there, let's get into employment. I searched for employment for weeks before I actually took a position. I interviewed at a lot of Mexican companies, from law firms to call centers to administrative positions, and the majority of them were going to pay me between 10 to 13,000 pesos per month, which is about like $600 or so. And I remember when I got my first job offer for a call center servicing US-based clients, and I told my mom, hey, this is how much they offered me. She's like, that's really good, that's amazing. And it was like 12,000 pesos that they had offered me, and I was like, $600, you know, going from the States and earning a US salary to $600 a month was very daunting to me and scary. But I was like, okay. For some reason I kept searching. I kept searching for jobs. I looked on Craigslist, and I stumbled upon a job posting from a US-based employer that was looking to hire somebody for an administrative assistant position. Now, this was the first I had ever really and so I had came across a lot of call centers here locally in PV that were registered as Mexican companies that provided services to US-based clients, from call centers to law firms, etc. But they all had Mexican salaries. This particular job posting that I came across on Craigslist was a very similar job posting. You know, you'll be servicing US-based clients, etc. I ended up interviewing with them. I did like 3 or 4 interviews, and this ended up being the first company that I came across that paid in dollars. And at the time, I remember thinking, oh, I'm so lucky. This is probably the best job in PV. They started me out at like $7, $8 an hour, working full time. I started making around like, I want to say like $1,200 a month was my monthly salary, dollars. And this was my first job, which it was like a gold mine, right? I thought I had hit the lottery based on everything that my mom had told me and all the other jobs that I had interviewed at. Now, the difference with this particular company is that they were not a Mexican company. They were a US-based company out of California. They operated remotely, and they paid their employees as 1099 employees for tax purposes. And this was the first I've ever heard of something like this. I didn't know companies outsourced the way that they did. And I worked for this company for 3 years. So I made a pretty comfortable salary in comparison to everything else that I found locally in PV. I started out working at their office, and eventually I transitioned into working remotely. So I was able to kind of move freely. I moved to a different state. I continued to work for them. My employment with this company came to an end around the time that I went viral on TikTok. For obvious reasons, I think the company didn't want to take the liability of having me speak so openly about my criminal convictions, because they hadn't done a background check or anything like that. And I was working with client-sensitive information. It was a broker's office, a health insurance brokerage, where I just helped people enroll for health insurance. We were kind of the middleman we were the middleman between small business employers and their health insurance carriers. And so that employment came to an end around the 3-year mark. It was a very comfortable, salary for me, and I always felt like this is the best job that I can get in PV. If I ever fuck this up, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so when that employment terminated, it was around the time that I got on TikTok, and it was a really scary time for me because I thought, where else am I going to find employment like this? I felt like it was a one-in-a-lifetime thing, but I quickly realized that there were multiple other companies, even locally in PV, that had the same setup where they paid US dollars, and they employed me as a 1099 employee for their tax purposes. So I stumbled across another company locally in PV that did kind of the same stuff. They were like a health insurance brokerage, playing the middleman for Medicaid and then, their clients. And so I was just providing customer service, administrative assistant type of work. Again, my TikTok came into the play, and I was let go from that employer because of my social media platform. Again, they didn't want to take the risk of clients coming across me and finding out that I had these criminal convictions, because again, they also did not perform a background check. So this is now the second company I worked for that hired me just to service US-based clients without any type of background check, without much besides just, my name and here, we're going to pay you dollars. And so when that employment came to an end, I was growing a little bit more on TikTok, and around that time I posted, I lost my job and I got a lot of leads, and people started to point me into the direction of real estate. The majority of real estate agents don't have a lot of time for their administrative tasks, like social media management, like emails, like cold calling, etc. So I was hired by a realtor as a virtual assistant. And prior to this, I didn't have any experience as a virtual assistant, but I had the basic skill set for a customer service position, right? I had phone etiquette, I had been in call centers the majority of my life. My customer service was A1 by then because I'd spent so many years in the customer service field. And so I had the basic skill set for a virtual assistant, AKA a VA. But I didn't know that. Prior to becoming a VA for a realtor, I was just focused on finding customer service jobs because that's what I had done my entire life, call centers, and there's a ton of them out here for English speakers. So anyway, I was hired by a realtor, and that was my introduction into the real estate world as a virtual assistant. I worked for 2 other realtors since, just providing administrative support, from checking their emails, following up on emails, cold calling. A lot of realtors will hire somebody to do their cold calling because they just don't have the time for it. You're pretty much like a personal assistant. And it was the same setup. They would hire me as a 1099 employee and pay me dollars. And so by then, I started to realize that it wasn't just luck, that I had developed some kind of a skill for finding these employers and being able to land US-based employment. And so I started sharing this on my social media platforms. It gathered a lot of attention because a lot of people like me weren't aware that this was even an option, right? You think deportation means you're going to be making pesos, and your opportunities are limited, which they very much are. And these opportunities with US-based clients aren't everywhere, right? They're not on every corner, but if you know what to look for, if you know how to tailor your resume, you can find a lot of opportunities out there. So I began sharing this content through my platforms. I began meeting with people one-on-one through Zoom calls and coaching people to find US-based employment very similar to mine. So I'm going to go through the websites that I use, the tips that I can give you to help you land US-based employment similar to what I've been doing for the 4 years that I've been living here. So the number one site that I have used to help others find US-based employment is Upwork.com. Upwork.com is a huge database of employers and employees connecting for remote work from all over the world, not just the US. There are employers from the UK. People from all over the world jump on here to look for employees and for work. Okay, so there are advantages for both parties when employers are looking to outsource their labor. For example, in my situation, the companies that I have worked for in the US have all paid me a lower salary than they would pay somebody, for example, in California. However, they pay me a higher salary than I would receive from a Mexican employer, right? So it's a win-win. The majority of employers that choose to outsource is because they can find cheaper labor, from hiring people in Mexico to the Philippines, etc. So you do have to, again, know how to present your proposals, your applications, so that you aren't taken advantage of and hired at a rate of $4 an hour, right? You have to know your value and how to market yourself, really. So anyway, since I dipped my feet into the real estate world, I have been just doing virtual assisting. And being a virtual assistant through Upwork or as a freelancer really allows me to make my own hours, set my own rates, and choose what type of work I do and for who, versus working for a company like I did the first 3 years living in PV, and I was, strapped to the chair Monday through Friday, 9 to 7 or 11 to 7 p.m. every single day. So virtual remote work has not only given me the flexibility to work from home, be a mother, work on my projects, but it's also given me flexibility in my schedule and more control over my own schedule. I will briefly touch on your resume and the importance of tailoring your resume as a US-based resume. I've met with a lot of people who have reached out to me for help on this topic, and the first thing that I look through is their resumes, and a lot of them are tailored as Mexican resumes. So there's a few tips when you are submitting for these jobs. Number one, you have to create your resume like a US resume. For example, Mexican resumes often have a picture of their face, their age, their gender, things that we don't include in the US because the US really doesn't discriminate based on gender, age, etc., like they do in Mexico. So I always, start with reviewing resumes, giving feedback on the things that make your resume stick out and easy for a US-based employer to contact you. So number one, you will want to have a US-based phone number. A lot of these employers aren't going to know about WhatsApp or go through the difficulty of learning how to dial internationally to reach you. You can obtain a US-based number by using one of the apps, right? There's like free text. There's a lot of apps that you can download that will give you a US-based number for a small fee or even free sometimes. I also exclude my physical location because you are targeting remote work. Your physical location really is irrelevant. So I just put my phone number, my email address, and then take a couple of resume building workshops so you can kind of know how to tailor your resume. You want to have your resume all on one page, very easy and quick to skim through, because the majority of employers are not going to give your resume very much time, maybe 3 to 5 seconds. So I always suggest creating your resumes through a resume builder, as well as tailoring your resume to a virtual assistant position. I used to be one of these people where I would make a resume just like a universal resume for anything, right? And I would use that same resume for every position that I was applying for. I have found better success in editing and tailoring each resume to each position. So now, since I target virtual assisting, I have a resume that is tailored specifically for that position. So you'll want to work on your resume. You will then go through Upwork. You'll create your account. Another website that I frequently use is Fiverr.com. Fiverr is very similar to Upwork.com, and it's just a bunch of people on a website looking for freelance work and offering freelance work. So these websites are very similar. I tell people, when you're looking for remote work, you want to jump on these sites like the daily newspaper and just submit proposals daily, because there's constant jobs being posted every single day. So that gives you kind of a brief rundown of what I have done and how I've been able to obtain US-based employment and earn dollars for the entire time that I have lived in Mexico since my deportation. It has allowed me to live a little bit more comfortably. It has allowed me to obtain some financial security and to be able to provide a comfortable lifestyle for my 5 children. I'll make another video later on about obtaining custody of my children, because I have set up a calendar on Calendly.com for people that may need one-on-one assistance. and going through Upwork, or help with their resume, or just they want more detailed information than what I made in this video. And I decided to make a video about it because I have questions daily about how do you do this, where can I find this. So everything that I've explained in this YouTube is typically what I cover in the consultations when it comes to US based employment. However, I can go into deeper depth and give you more individual assistance through these consultations. So anyway, that's a quick summary. If you guys want to leave your questions in the comments. One thing that I do like to, my content has strived to focus on is changing the narrative that life out here is nothing but a struggle and poverty and all the things that we have from the media. And it did take me a while to build my foundation, and it hasn't always been just living comfortably, but with a lot of hard work and resiliency, I was able to build a life that is very similar to the level of lifestyle that I have in the US because of the skill set that I acquired living and working in the US for so many years. And there are people like me that maybe don't know, that choose different paths after deportation. But I think I like to touch on these parts of my story to show that there is light out here, there is life out here, there is employment, there are opportunities, there are ways to make a decent living. When I arrived in Mexico, I always knew that this was an opportunity for a fresh start. I was starting from scratch, and this was part of it, just kind of digging into employment and the hustle of how to make money, how to make dollars from out here, because as you know, dollars go a long ways out here in comparison to making pesos.